I first want to ask you about the turnout in this by-election, because it is not comically low. It's actually really quite respectable for a by-election. I was looking at the turnout that David Davis got for his similar sort of by-election back in 2008, when he called a by-election on civil liberties grounds. The other parties refused to stand. People said it was a bit of a joke. There was another long list of joke candidates. The turnout for that one was 34%. That's almost 10 points lower than what we've seen for Nigel Farage tonight. It's a respectable turnout, is it not?
Nigel Farage thinks he's a game-changing politician. He thinks he's a rock star politician. The turnout is far lower than Andy Burnham got in his by-election just a few months ago. So I wouldn't use the comparison myself with David Davis in what seems like an era, generation ago. Compare him to Andy Burnham. This by-election turnout is low.
Low compared to a by-election that might decide the next Prime Minister, but compared to the Runcorn and Helsby by-election, for instance, it's a similar turnout.
Nigel Farage thinks he's going to be the next Prime Minister. I think this by-election's a joke. I think Nigel Farage fighting bin-face and trying to claim a man with a bin on his head is the establishment figure is a joke. But Farage himself thinks he is a rock star, game-changing politician who wants to walk through the door of number 10 in just a few years' time. That by-election comparator with the current Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, I think is a fair one, and the turnout is low compared to that.
That's a fair point. We are looking at on screen now at the premier challenger to Nigel Farage, a man calling himself Count Binface, who has a sort of bin-like thing attached to his head. Joe Robertson, is it really fair to the people of Clacton that this was the man who became the single largest challenger to Nigel Farage, a man who some Conservative activists have been out leafleting for and canvassing for in recent weeks? Should the Conservatives, who won 31,000 votes in this constituency as recently as 2019, should the Conservatives not have put up a candidate?
I think what would have been fair to the people of Clacton and fair to the British taxpayers is the by-election never happened. It's a fake by-election because Farage wanted to distract and deflect from the parliamentary inquiry going into his affairs relating to donations. It should never have happened. That's what's unfair about it. And Farage should have understood that parties were not going to put up candidates against him, and that he would be fighting a bin, and that he would be trying to justify a bin as an establishment figure just because some activists of other parties might have been out on the doorsteps with him. The whole thing is a charade. It's a farce. The people of Clacton deserve better. Farage had his mandate. He won in 2024. I wouldn't have voted for him, but it was a democratic mandate. He should see out the parliamentary term without this farcical show we're seeing this evening. But that's the way it is. I'm sure he will win, but it says nothing that we didn't already know about Farage, that it's all about him and not about the serious issues affecting the country.
Does it not confirm something that some people have tried to doubt, which is that Nigel Farage, at least in Clacton, still holds the same sort of levels of popularity, if not higher, than at the time of the last general election? That there are many parts of the country that feel as left behind as Clacton, that are perhaps are seaside towns that have seen better days in decades past, that there are many Clactons in the United Kingdom that perhaps feel the same.
I agree there are many Clactons in the United Kingdom, not least of all my own constituency in Isle of Wight East. It's a seaside constituency, feels very left behind, feels ignored by some of the establishment figures, and it's about acknowledging that and coming up with policy and ideas that will make a real difference. But again, if I go back to Clacton itself specifically, I think it deserves better. I think it deserves the person who was elected in 2024, the same year I was elected for my constituency, to get on with the job of representing them, not going through this one-man publicity show that really says nothing. He may well win. I suspect he will win. Whether he's more or less popular because he's beaten a man dressed as a bin is neither here nor there. And with great respect to the people of Clacton, it's not them or indeed any one constituency that's going to decide who forms a government at the next election.
It seems that the Prime Minister currently thinks that one constituency can determine the makeup of a government.
It's certainly true that, of course, in that one-off example of a change of leadership of the governing party, yes, of course, Makerfield had a very big say on who became Prime Minister. But if we're talking about a general election in ordinary times, and that's what you, the broadcasters, us as politicians, we all try to understand and project and imagine based on by-election results. This by-election result we can't take anything from, because it's Nigel Farage versus a bin, and that doesn't represent what a general election will be about.
Although, of course, since time immemorial, I dare say, there have been joke candidates, and the perennial picture of the prime ministerial candidate standing next to a giant fish finger, or a man with a comically large rosette, or a man with a bucket on his head, or indeed a bin on his head. These are, or a man dressed as Elmo, as we saw in the case of Theresa May in 2017. Is this not a normal part of our politics?
It's certainly normal and a part of our politics that I rather like. I think that anyone can put up, and it's the democratic process that decides who gets elected. Look, is that maybe that's the genius of Nigel Farage. He's finally got a picture of himself with Count Binface, much like Andy Burnham's got. You know, I imagine that's not what it was all about. There are probably easier ways of getting a photo with Binface. But yeah, look, Tom, I get your point. I have nothing against so-called joke candidates standing. They represent a great history in British democracy.